let me start first with you, Shaurya, because this could be, the most disputable thing. Is corruption waning? Is the state getting less powerful in some areas, less effective? Now, I just want to take one thing which is dominating headlines now as a trend. It may be short term, but it's very relevant for businesses. The state may have less power to perhaps give out things. Now, as you point out, it's reined in by the courts, by media, by opposition. But it's also become a very investigative state. Everything is disputed so much that, cold scam, you have IAS officers in prison. You have a series of investigations against all kinds of bankers, even independent board members and banks. So would businesses worry that no decision will get taken simply because of investigation 3 years down the line?
Yes, I completely agree with you, and I think that's what I had alluded, that we don't know where this new order is going to sit, because we've disrupted the old order. I don't think any particular party or politician has done it. I think it's systematically happening, because of the reasons that you mentioned: greater accountability, greater transparency, judicial activism. We are now in a situation where exactly what is happening is that the government, the state is becoming increasingly defensive, and therefore it is becoming more intrusive. And therefore nobody wants to take a decision. So yes, this is a big challenge for business, and the answer to this also does not lie in the hands of the business. To some extent it lies in the hands of the electorate. It lies in the hands of the people.
The electorate gave a resounding victory. I mean, the electorate gave a 335 seat backing, something which has not been done since 1984. I think that was the last time we got...
and that's what I said. And you interpreted that as a mandate to do this, or whatever your priority. The politician did not interpret that mandate as that. That is what I said. A politician will interpret his mandate depending upon, at times, this, but also there may be other political priorities. The politician interpreted as saying, what are the things that I need to do to stay in power? And therefore this or other things like this may go down in priority. So this is the state of flux that we are currently going through.
Okay. Let me toss the same thing to Mr. Jaishankar, not the least because he has seen both bureaucracy and the political class at close quarters. Do you think this sense of indecision, while I agree with many of the trends that you have spoken about, for me this trend of indecision is going to hamper business decisions a great deal? You see it going away? Is it peaking off because there's so much investigation at some point you just want to get going with things?
Well, look, I would say in all honesty, those who want to make decisions will make decisions. Those who want to rationalize indecisions will use it to rationalize indecision. So I'm not your question sort of suggests a very paralyzed polity. I'm not quite sure I agree with that. On the one hand, yes, I accept, or I note at least a lot of what you said. I think there's the other side of it as well, which was that we are moving. There's more data out there. Because of that, there are processes out there which make it, a lot of things which would have stayed undercover don't stay undercover. So, I think Shaurya has got one point, which is society is changing, techniques are changing, technology is changing, priorities are changing. So, some of what you say will happen.
Okay, well, if there are people who disagree that there isn't paralysis, I'm very happy. But I thought Shaurya almost agreed that there is a great deal of paralysis in bureaucracy and in banking. But at least two areas where there's investigation.
Mr. Jaishankar also, that in areas where the politician had the priority, he got it done. Jan Dhan was important, yes. So it got done. Swachh Bharat was important, so it got done. How does
GST got done?
Yes, GST got done. So how is the question for business is that how will the politician put his priority? As because there is priority, there are also riots happening because of the cow.
Adrian concluded his sentence by saying, if trade disputes get resolved and China recovers, he began with that. Is this really a 90-day dispute? The way in which the Huawei case has progressed, clearly this is not a trade dispute. It's going to be disputes across several frontiers, across all frontiers, intellectual property, it'll go on and on, geopolitics, South China Sea. So do you think that we are going to live with a US-China dispute, not for 90 days, not even for the term of a president, but probably like the US-USSR war, for a generation?
Well, first, I just want to make sure I got what Adrian said correctly, because I think he identified two problems. One is the trade issue. One is the Chinese slowdown, and the two are not necessarily correlated. There's a Chinese slowdown, which is autonomous of the trade, and in my view, actually, perhaps even more worrisome than the trade issue itself. But coming back to it, will the trade issue remain trade issue? Will it stay 90 days? My point was it has ceased to be a trade issue. It is today, yes, it's a trade issue, but it has also become a technology access issue. It's become a technology control issue. It's become, well, does the WTO work or not work issue? It has assumed political dimensions, strategic dimensions of various kinds. So I think we are seeing something very profound. We are seeing the rise of a new superpower, a new global power certainly, and the Newton's third law of politics applies. If something big happens in politics, there's going to be a big political reaction, and that's what we are seeing actually happen. So I don't think Americans are anymore treating this as a trade deficit issue. I think they see China, particularly if you see the target, look at Peter Navarro's writings. I mean, a lot of it is make in China 2025. It's a challenge, and last week. The Americans have identified 14 emerging technologies which they are considering for export control. Now, that is clearly a certain direction the world is going. And export controls are very much terminology of the Cold War.
If it's not a 90-day effort, then would you have to revise your thesis that China would still be able to recover and do better next year?
So the slowdown in China is about domestic policy.
Yes.
It's not about trade. The trade numbers actually out of China are still quite strong. So the contribution is coming through there positively. So I see them as independent. If you wanted to link them, then I think you would stretch it by saying that the Chinese might want a little bit more cushion on their economy, so would be more inclined to ease. I've been struck by the Trump administration, how they take us to the brink, and when you start to think about Trump dealing with AMLO, the new president of Mexico, it was quite extraordinary. Actually, he's not even president, he's not even elected, he's not even sworn in, but they've come to a deal with Mexico very quickly. Because one of the great advantages of TPP, and they spent so much time on this Trans-Pacific Partnership, is they know the deal that needs to be signed. And when they have the willingness to sign it, it goes ahead. And so we have, as described here, we have a geopolitical dispute going on with a trade part to it. I think you could continue to have protected technologies not being sold to the United States, but you could still have greater clarity about what the tariffs are going to be. And let's not forget that US jobs are being lost already because of Trump's policy. It's costing General Motors $1 billion extra per year, the US trade policy. The reason that they've closed factories is because of that. And I know that Trump doesn't want to attack who's a very good CEO, but that's not the facts here. And I think, he also runs a political risk when people that voted for him start to lose their jobs, and maybe as they lose their jobs, they'll see the reality around it.
So your base case is that it will not, the 10% tariffs don't become 25% tariffs. That's the base case of your investment thesis.
Yeah, so I think that the can will be kicked. And there is a chance, as we saw with NAFTA, that renegotiations happen pretty quickly.
There is a political economic polemics in your analysis, and I'm trying to...
But they could coexist.
Yeah.
Because
no, could they? Because, I'm just trying to compare it with the US-USSR and the US-China relationship. There they were mutually exclusive. Here they are deeply intertwined. So if China slows, then US also slows because China is a big market for the US. So will they see the rationality of that, or will both grind lower because they're intertwined and they are still adversarial? Okay, first you take that.
So I think this is the risk, isn't it? Because Trump is fixated on the trade and the current account deficit. Trump has put in place a big fiscal stimulus, so the savings rate of the federal government is going down. There's no change in the household savings rate. So the US total savings rate, savings deficit goes up, the current account's going to go up. And if he's fixated on that, his current course of action is not going to resolve it. If he can be distracted to look at other issues and they can negotiate on the particular issues with the Chinese, then I think we can make progress. But there is a failure of the economic logic around this, which we need to keep on going back to.
Yes, so we hope that brinkmanship will lead to people moving away from a position of confrontation. One more question, and then I'm coming to issues Indian. How would you expect India to tackle this? I mean, foreign businesses investing in India would want to know that in the US-USSR era, India really tilted, although it was a non-aligned bloc, it was a non-aligned bloc which had more USSR friends. At this point in time, how would foreign businesses want to outguess India's behavior? Does India tilt? Which way? Does it have the wherewithal to not tilt at all?
No, look, I would, let me just go back very briefly to the previous question. Okay, if I were to, and today it takes a bold person to make a prediction, but I would make a prediction which is that the big problems will continue between US and China, but there will be interims, road stop solutions, because both will have common interest, for example, in stabilizing markets. Both will have some common interest in stabilizing trade. So you're going to have partial solutions, but a larger overhang which will continue to be a problem. On the question of what does India do in all of this, I think there are two sets of responses. One is, look, there are a lot of things which we assumed other people would do, and they won't do it, and therefore we will have to do it. So there's going to be a greater role. You'll have to step forward on a whole lot of things. We've already seen that, when something goes wrong, there's a war somewhere in Yemen, there's an earthquake in Nepal. So the world's not going to come. Either we do it or nobody does it. But the other part of it on US-China, I think, in a sense, do bear in mind, we have a big trade deficit ourselves with China.
Yes.
So in the sense, if China actually is more sensitive to global opinion on trade, it's not bad for India. In fact, we could, in a sense, be a beneficiary. To some extent, if China has been very America-centric in the last 15, 20 years, understandably, I think today you're seeing a correction in Chinese policies. You see Chinese reach out to India, you see Chinese reach out to Japan.
Yes.
You've seen much more, I've heard more positive talk from China on trade in the last 1 year than I've heard in 5 years when I was ambassador there. So I think what's going to happen is everybody will try to get a little more margin vis-a-vis other people, and in a sense, who plays the game well. I see an opportunity here. I see an opportunity with American companies who are looking elsewhere. I see an opportunity with Chinese companies which want to go out of China, and in my view, we should welcome them.
Okay. Shaurya, obviously one of the things that the bus that India missed, one of the many buses that India missed, was getting into the global supply chain and trying to take advantage of the Chinese growth. Now that supply chain will break simply because of the competition between US and China, do you think the Indian political class and the bureaucracy is seized of the opportunity and will be able to snatch some of that supply chain or snatch opportunities which perhaps will come our way because will come the way of other emerging markets because of the dispute between US and China? Is the awareness?
I don't think they need to have an awareness, but the answer is yes, because I think the way this, with this GST coming and with, the framework for this is already laid. And you can now already see the huge amount of competitive federalism that is happening with the states competing with each other. So while they may or may not, they don't need to understand this full dimension. What they are going to do is that I'm seeing even small states now compete to get into this supply chain. They want to make themselves as investment destinations and offer companies a chance for them to build and produce there. So I think by default it will happen. The enabling environment is actually becoming there, was already there now to a great extent with this GST coming in. So I think that India should seize this opportunity. Whether India will go this in a concerted bid as a nation, well, that's not how our polity is structured. We don't sit and decide now there's a huge opportunity, let us take it. What we have got to do is let our states now compete. We are sitting in Maharashtra the other day. The Chief Minister was telling that, by the time, today Maharashtra is receiving about, 70-80% of total investment in India. By the time India becomes $1 trillion economy, plugging into the global supply chain, Maharashtra in itself will become a $1 trillion GDP. So, I think the states will take a lead on this.
Okay, well, we have to see about state chief ministers and their ability to drive economic growth to that extent. That certainly will be one trend to watch for, how powerful our state chief ministers and how capable they are. Adrian, I take your point about EPS growth in India simply not firing. I think I must have spent the last 5 years saying that EPS growth comes in the second half, and it doesn't come in the second half. This year, again, we are waiting. The second quarter was good, but people are not still so confident of the second half. How confident are you about next year? Do you think, financials are at least getting rid of the NPA problem? If you actually look at Indian EPS growth, ex-financials, the growth is not all that bad. So is there a positive surprise in FY20?
So this is like a game of poker. So the double bluff is that the investors that look at the number and say it's too high will probably be saying, well, now that oil has come off, the rupee is recovering, the chance of an interest rate increase is lower, then the level of downgrade is probably going to be lower than the market was expecting. So it's the sort of double bluff will be a bit better, but it's still going to be a downgrade.
Not double, actually, so I would say quadruple, because we've gone through it for several years.
That's not too convoluted description, but I think that's basically what's going to happen. The other thing to remember here with the valuation point is that the household savings rate, although it's declining, is still high. The inflows into equity mutual funds still remains quite strong. And unfortunately, there's a political inability here to do privatizations, or to use a more politically sensitive word, divestment. So the supply of equity, even though the market cap here has gone up from 69 billion to 2 trillion, which is sort of 18% compounded rate, the supply of equity at a large scale that might come from government doesn't exist, which is very disappointing because the banks really could use a little bit more equity capital.